This is Dr. Mark Trexler with the Climate Countdown, here to provide you with insight into some of the key questions and risks associated with warming the Earth's climate. Today's topic: what is the social cost of carbon? The social cost of carbon, or SCC, is intended to represent the economic costs of the climate warming associated with emitting to the atmosphere a ton of carbon dioxide or the equivalent, commonly referred to as CO2e. SCC conversations go back a long way. One of the first such estimates 30 years ago arrived at a value of between 30 cents and $3 per ton of CO2e emitted. 15 years later, the Stern Review on the Economics of Climate Change arrived at a much higher figure, about $85. For purposes of regulatory decision-making in the U.S., an SCC of $35 escalating each year was in place during the Obama administration. To give you some context, an SCC of $35 is roughly equivalent to 3.5 cents per kilowatt hour of coal-fired electricity and 35 cents per gallon of gasoline. The social cost of carbon fits well into our prevailing cost-benefit model of private and public policy decision-making. For example, regulatory agencies like the Environmental Protection Agency routinely use cost-benefit analysis to justify health and other regulations. Applying the right social cost of carbon in those cases should lead to the right, or at least the economically efficient, level of regulation. By implication, it should also lead to an economically efficient global temperature. What could be simpler? The problem is that social cost of carbon estimates range from just a few dollars to thousands of dollars per ton. To understand why the range is so enormous, you have to understand how the social cost of carbon is arrived at, since there is no way to empirically measure it. The SCC is generally calculated using integrated assessment models, which grossly simplify the climate system and its economics, translating everything into a series of equations. And no one can really know how accurate those equations are. We do know that lots of things are inevitably left out. A huge variable in calculating the SCC is the choice of an economic discount rate. Almost any discount rate dramatically reduces the perceived future costs of climate change, a point made well by economist Lester Lave in stating that, quote, "If the world were to disappear in 25 or 30 years, it would make no difference to economists today," end quote. At the other end of the scale, one study using a 0% discount rate ended up with what they called the ultimate cost of carbon of $100,000 per ton. Another big variable in calculating the SCC is whether you're calculating global or national costs. The Trump administration, for example, calculated the SCC of U.S. emissions based purely on the basis of U.S. impacts and reduced the Obama SCC by 80% to $7 per ton. Risk adversity is also key. In other words, how sure do you want to be you're not understating the SCC? An SCC you can be 95% sure captures the right number, for example, is much higher than an SCC with a 50% confidence level. The logic behind the social cost of carbon is sound, but SCC estimates can vary enormously based on policy and value judgments upon which reasonable people might disagree, not to mention the substantial uncertainties in forecasting future climate change and its economic impacts. So don't ever accept an SCC estimate as gospel. This is Mark Trexler with the Climate Countdown. Dig deeper into this and other Climate Countdown topics at our website, climatecountdown.climatesites.net. And thanks for listening.